Please join with me in the call to gather. On this, a most faithful and fate-filled day, we reach the climax in the unfolding drama of the life and ministry of Jesus. This is a fateful day because we have been a faithless people. We have been too much like the innkeeper who could find no room for Jesus in the inn, and the rich young ruler who could find no room in his life for Jesus' radical teachings, and even Herod, who could not find room for Jesus in his oppressively structured world. This is a fateful day because we have been a faithless people. We have been too much like James and John, who promised to follow Jesus but demanded choice seats, and Peter, who hailed Jesus as the Christ but wanted nothing to do with a suffering servant, and even Judas, who loved Jesus much but wanted him to claim a throne of messianic power and might. This is a fateful day because we have been a faithless people. As we recall a cross of our own construction this day, we remember all of the crosses we have shunned to be safe and secure, untroubled and unmoved. Grant us the grace, O God, to follow this one who was faithful unto death, that we might be faithful to him into life, this day and all days. Amen.
The us join our hearts in prayer. O Christ, who forsook no one, but was forsaken by the closest of friends, and who committed no crime, yet was sentenced to a criminal's death, we enter your presence in awe and adoration. On this day centuries ago, you could have saved your life, but you refused to betray the purpose for which you have been born. You had come into the world to love God and neighbor as yourself. And when that love required you to shoulder a cross, you summoned the strength to bear it. Today, O Christ, as we read your written word, which bears witness to you, the living word, as we sing and pray about the cross, teach us the meaning of your word and cross once again, and help us to take up our cross and follow you. Amen. We turn now to a reading of a portion of Psalm 22. Hear the psalmist sing. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me, from the words of my groaning? Oh my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night, but find no rest. Yet it was you who took me from the womb. You kept me safe on my mother's breast. On you I was cast from my birth, and since my mother bore me, you have been my God. Do not be far from me, for trouble is near, and there is no one to help. But you, O Lord, do not be far away. O my help, come quickly to my aid.
Our readings tonight come from an epic poem by John Lynch. It's a book called A Woman Wrapped in Silence. It is the story of Jesus' life from Mary's perspective. The words are powerful, the words are harsh, and very often painful. But as I have said, we need to journey through this difficult day to be able to get to the beauty and blessing of Easter morn. I hope I can do his work justice this evening. We have grown so used to looking on a crucifix. We've seen so many crosses, delicate and cut in ivory, and holding up the white Christ, placed in all proportions. We've seen so much of symmetry and carven wood, and we have come so many times to find Jesus in a shrine. We've worn this on our breasts and clung to it, have gone to sleep beneath it for a prayer and waked again. And we have known him crucified. His head is upright, and he stands tall upon a solid ledge with arms extended and with dignity. And it is good for us to shape him so in meaning and to leave the stark remembrances covered in the years, as once the darkness closed in upon a plainer and more painful sight. We could not bear to see, no more than others, older, nearer to his day, could bear the naked horror of a cross. They could not look upon a crucifix so easily, his first followers. They could not look, for in their lifetime they had seen men nailed. Beyond the city's gates, along a road, they'd seen them, bodies broken, stretched and drawn and taut upon a stake and crossbar, nailed to it and reddened, writhing like a raw scar cut against the sky. They'd seen them twisted, sinking of their own weight, pulled upon the nails with tongues extended, heads that swung in torture side to side, that lifted up and cried for death in babbled spurts of sound. They had seen them. They had seen men nailed. And there was the sound, this sound of hammering that filled the ears of all who were present, a thudded bang that reminded all that this was a death the Romans gave to slaves. This was a death that held contempt and pain and shame, all fastened into one great spreading gesture, set and bleeding there. And this was his death, done to him upon a hill. And they could not be quick in looking, even on this sign.
Sorrow and love
His mother was near. She saw him. She could see his cross in making, full and plain, so near her eyes could find no shield nor lesser sight, nor any refuge from the full perceiving, had her love been frailer to have searched for it. She saw him staring, near enough to fill all need she had that could be filled, and near enough to fix in her a locked intensity of rigid pain that raised forever lost and lonely ultimates that only he knew, and her sharing heart. His knees were twisted now, drawn athwart, the body quivering along the black beam laid upon the earth. He was not still. They held him there until the long first spasms died down. And he could tighten cords again and stretch his arms down to the hand that was not nailed and pry the fingers open. She could see. And then the sound again. The iron beating iron, iron beating, and the twist and squirm and shaken answering in all of his form that laid beneath them. And suddenly, there before her, was the rigid trinity of hammered endings. There was no return now, no time nor places further ahead and down the road. He was nailed in his hands forever now, past restoration. Nailed and nailed and nailed, his hands that could not fall, nor open, nor reach out for her. She could see them, shut in iron, useless, shattered in 2 pegs, so that he could be hung upon his cross. A sigh as if a wind along a grain field moved over them. And underneath the heat, the hill was murmurous, and crying came, and shouting broke again. And from afar, more answering. They'd raised him on his cross. She knew that. She could feel this swift response and knew before her eyes had opened that he was hanging in the sky. She saw him so and bore the impact of him on her soul forever. She could see. He was unfurled for shame and marked in silhouette above the world's edge, and they saw him now as she carried him within her in a secret held behind the beating of her heart. She knew. She knew now that he was uplifted, taken from her like a wound that had been hidden in the years, all open now and clear for full revealing. This was her love here, and she was not absent. He was speech for her who never spoke, and sign that she had made him sacrifice within her at his birth, and in him found her long obedience. This was the measure of her part, her own Gethsemane. The waking and watching in the nights at Nazareth, the lonely pain, the depth beneath her eyes, her solitude. He was uplifted, flung against the sky, and fixed there immovably. And she could lift her head and look on him as they were looking. She could see him above her, mounted, for he was plain upon his cross. But only she could find the dark remembering and what had not been once forgotten in the years. She saw the spittle wet upon his face, the bruise still dark where they had struck him. She could find his tattered knees that marked the soil and streak of dirt upon him, left there from the reeling moment when he'd sprawled along the road. She saw the scorn, the slime of all degrading, the contempt, the loathsomeness of him. She heard them laughing at his twisted feet and quarreling about a robe they'd stripped from him since they had nailed him past the use or the need of it. And calmly, certainly, in simple knowledge as a mind might see its thoughts, she knew that he was very God, a very God, yet still her beloved child. She did not turn away. The one thing that we know is this: she did not turn away nor fail before him for an instant. It is not recorded that she wept or asked for pity. It has not been written of her that she languished, crushed and broken on the drawing length of hours, where he stared above their heads and felt his warm blood spurting at the nails. She stood beside the cross. John tells us that. She stood and spoke no word, but he could find her there, unflinching, statured by the long preparing, grown to this, and strong enough to meet his last need and to wear her last tremendous majesty. She was his mother. Yet what she had given him was broken now, and scourged and spiked upon a beam. Soon he would be bereft of Bethlehem, and she would see her life fade out of him, and all her giving moved to darkness and to an end. He was her birth. But now no angels came, nor shepherds climbed to find him at her hands, and this was not a night of silver stars hushed all above, a cave where Joseph's footfall and his presence made a sweet loneliness. And she was watched over her child upon the straw. They had all gone away, but she had not gone. She now stood in this day, a day that glared in unrelenting light, a hill with sweating crowds, a place that smelled and wavered in the heat. But she was there, a figure lost and unregarded, one among a multitude and muted laws. But she was there, for she was his, and she would bear him unto death. She looked again to find him darkening. The wounds were thicker at his hands and old and bleeding, like fruit too long beneath the summer sun. His bruises had been turning dark, and flies were at his head, and he had sagged as if a weight had pulled upon his shoulders, and he had ceased to strain. He was a man who hung upon the sinews of his arms and did not rise, nor turn, nor fall, but only hung, enduring time and pain. He hung in pain, unmoving in the clear essential hold of it that was like air above him and around him, pressing inward, constant, near, and unrelieved. She saw him in his agony, the small unconscious flicking of his tongue to wet his lips, the eyelids, patient, weary, closed against the light, the unprotesting weight of him, the gentleness that even now the savage spiking and the twisted long distortion could not break and could not change. And then the darkness rising like a thickened mist had covered him, and voices softened down to harsh, infrequent whisperings that bore an evidence of awe. They felt the rumblings of an unquiet earth beneath them, and the sky was altered, and the monstrous threat of evil moved upon it like a fear, and huge, enormous dread lay clouded on the world. He was a figure, lonely, lost, aloof upon his cross. And in his pain, he had gone beyond the reach of human ease. And for some lengthened moments now, he had not raised his head or moaned or seemed to live. He was lifted up and was so broken and so torn. He had not moved, but then his breath was gasped in sudden need, his breast heaving, laboring, his arms were tightened, and his bended face was swung and tortured upward toward the dark. He cried and cried aloud, and she heard him sob in jagged pain as if he'd lost his very soul and was crying in anguish from the rim of hell. My God, why have you forsaken me? How much and what length of dreams and hopes and sorrows, of what plans and destinies laid deep beneath the slow repeating years and guided up to this, their pinnacle and their end? What laughter sounding in the summer sun, what race and tumult of a boy's young gladness, what of glimpses and perceiving open suddenly to pain, what ache of childhood reaching to her, what of prayers and departures and tears and laboring, and what of gain and triumph carried on his breath and summoned forever. Only she who was silent, so silent, only she could know. And what of love he said he had come to perfect? Yet now she heard his words formed by gasps. She heard his consummation. And suddenly he was no more. all the world was gone. She was left among the shadows of an empty earth and in nothingness. There were no sounds, nor sights, nor movements. There was nothing now, no ground, nor quaking in the ground, no dark, nor cries, nor sobbing close to her. There were no gathered groups that turned away with fear upon them and with hands that beat their breasts. There was no wind, no heat, nor tired ache. There was only nothingness, and he who was a gray face staring out of sightless eyes. The substance and the forms of solid things had gone. There was no time nor place, but only he who did not move, but hung so still and so limp, so heaved upon the nails. She saw him, dead. Dead. He would not cry again or thirst or bear the agony of his open wounds. And this was the first time that she had been utterly alone. Alone with nowhere she could think to or could hope or ask to be. He was gone from the earth. She looked to him. The tumult and the throng, the hill, the shouts, the dark, had all vanished. And there was only he. His wounds, his riven hands, the shape and the red of him, the opened mouth so loose and so dark. There was only he who did not live.